The city was never truly silent, but tonight, the hush felt deeper, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I walked the cracked sidewalk, my scrubs clinging to my skin after a 12-hour shift, the faint scent of antiseptic still lingering on my hands. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the empty avenue. I passed the old apartment building on the corner, its bricks faded and windows dark, a relic from another era. My mind wandered to the warmth of my bed, the promise of sleep, the comfort of routine. Then, a sharp crack shattered the stillness. I turned, heart thudding, as a sudden orange glow bloomed behind the building's grimy windows. Flames licked hungrily at the curtains, devouring the night's calm. For a moment, I stood frozen, the world narrowing to the roar of fire and the acrid bite of smoke curling into the air. My breath caught as the first scream pierced the chaos, a desperate, raw plea for help that cut through every instinct to run. Without thinking, I dropped my bag and sprinted toward the entrance, the heat already prickling my skin. The door was hot beneath my palm, but I pushed through, coughing as smoke clawed at my throat. Inside, the hallway was a tunnel of shadows and flickering light, the air thick with panic and the sharp tang of burning plastic. I could barely see, but the cries grew louder, more urgent, echoing off the peeling walls. Every step forward was a battle between fear and duty. I remembered the faces of patients I'd calmed, the lives I'd steadied with steady hands and a gentle voice. But this was different. This was chaos, unpredictable and wild. My heart hammered as I called out, searching for the source of the cries. The world outside faded, replaced by the relentless advance of fire and the knowledge that someone, somewhere in this inferno, needed me. As I moved deeper into the building, the flames roared louder, and the cries for help became my only guide. I had no idea what I would find, or if I would make it out again, but I couldn't turn back. Not when someone's life hung in the balance, not when every second counted. And so I pressed on, into the heart of the fire, not knowing that this night would change everything. Smoke clawed at my lungs as I pressed forward, the world shrinking to the narrow, burning corridor ahead. My eyes watered, vision blurring, but I could still hear the desperate cries, closer now, urgent and raw. I called out, my voice hoarse. "Where are you?" The only answer was a cough, then a choked plea in accented English. "Help. Please." I followed the sound, stumbling over fallen plaster and broken glass. The heat was suffocating, sweat slicking my skin beneath my scrubs. I rounded a corner and saw him, a man slumped against the wall, half hidden by a collapsed beam. His face was obscured by a soot-stained mask, the kind you'd see in a hospital, but his eyes were wide and wild, reflecting the fire's hungry light. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and his leg was pinned beneath a heavy chunk of debris. For a split second, fear rooted me in place. He was a stranger and the building was coming down around us. But the training that had carried me through countless emergencies kicked in. I dropped to my knees beside him, ignoring the searing pain as I knelt on broken tile. "I'm here to help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you move your leg?" He shook his head, grimacing. The fire crackled closer, heat pressing against my back. I braced myself and shoved at the debris, muscles straining. It barely budged. The man tried to help, teeth gritted, but he was weak, his breath shallow and ragged. I glanced at the flames, calculating how much time we had. Seconds. Maybe a minute. "On 3, I said, locking eyes with him. 1, 2, 3. We pushed together, and the beam shifted just enough for him to drag his leg free. He cried out, but I grabbed his arm, hauling him upright. He was heavier than he looked, his body trembling with pain and exhaustion. I slung his arm over my shoulders, half carrying, half dragging him down the hallway as the fire roared behind us. The exit was a distant promise, the world reduced to smoke, heat, and the pounding of my heart. We stumbled through the maze of burning debris, the man leaning heavily on me, his breaths coming in short, desperate gasps. I could feel his blood soaking into my sleeve, but I didn't dare stop. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to save myself, but I couldn't leave him, not when I'd come this far. We reached the stairwell, flames licking at the banister. I could barely see, but I guided him down, step by agonizing step. The building groaned, a terrible, shuddering sound that made my blood run cold. "Almost there," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He squeezed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. At last, we burst through the front door, collapsing onto the cracked pavement outside. Cool air rushed into my lungs, sharp and clean after the suffocating smoke. I looked at the man beside me, his mask askew, eyes squeezed shut in pain. Sirens wailed in the distance, blue lights flashing as firefighters and paramedics swarmed the scene. I turned to thank him for trusting me, to ask his name, but he was already struggling to his feet. "Wait!" I called, reaching for his arm. He shook his head, urgency in his gaze. "Thank you," he rasped, voice low and accented. Then, before I could say another word, he limped away, disappearing into the shadows beyond the flashing lights. I stared after him, heart pounding, confusion swirling with relief and exhaustion. Who was he? Why had he been there, masked and alone? The questions burned brighter than the fire I'd just escaped. I wanted to chase after him, to demand answers, but my legs wouldn't move. Paramedics crowded around me, voices muffled by the ringing in my ears. As they checked me over, I kept glancing toward the darkness where he'd vanished, a strange sense of loss settling in my chest. I'd risked everything to save a stranger, and now he was gone, leaving behind only questions and the memory of his haunted eyes. I didn't know it yet, but this night was only the beginning. The man I'd saved was no ordinary victim, and my life was about to be swept into a world I'd never imagined. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my window, but the world felt off-kilter, as if the fire had burned away the edges of reality. My body ached from smoke and exhaustion, and my mind replayed the night's chaos in looping fragments, the heat, the stranger's eyes, the way he'd vanished into the dark. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was over, that I'd done what anyone would do, but the questions lingered, stubborn as bruises. I was halfway through a cup of coffee when a knock rattled my apartment door. I hesitated, glancing at the clock. Too early for visitors, too late for deliveries. Wariness prickled along my spine. I opened the door a crack, peering out. 2 men in dark suits stood in the hallway, their expressions unreadable. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other wiry and sharp-eyed. They looked out of place in my rundown building like wolves in a sheepfold. "Miss Russo?" the taller one asked, his accent unmistakably Italian. "We need you to come with us." My heart thudded. "Why? Who are you?" He offered a thin, polite smile. "A friend wishes to thank you for your bravery last night." "Please, it's important." Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door, but curiosity, and a strange sense of inevitability, held me in place. I grabbed my bag, phone clutched tight, and followed them down the stairs. Outside, a sleek black car waited at the curb, its windows tinted, engine purring like a predator. The men opened the door, and I slid inside, nerves jangling. The city blurred past as we drove, leaving behind the familiar streets of my neighborhood for winding roads lined with ancient oaks and iron gates. We stopped at a sprawling estate, its stone facade gleaming in the morning sun. The grounds were immaculate, fountains sparkling, roses blooming in perfect rows. It was a world away from my cramped apartment, a place of wealth and secrets. Inside, the air was cool and scented with polished wood and expensive cologne. I was led through marble halls to a sunlit study where a man waited by the window. He turned as I entered, and my breath caught. It was him, the man from the fire, clean-shaven now, dressed in a tailored suit but unmistakable. His eyes, dark and intense, met mine with a flicker of recognition. "Miss Russo," he said, his voice smooth but edged with command. "Thank you for saving my life." I stared, words tangled on my tongue. You're all right?" He nodded, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "Thanks to you. Please sit." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. I sat, hands folded tightly in my lap, acutely aware of the opulence around me. The gold-framed paintings, the heavy velvet drapes, the quiet hum of power. "My name is Alessandro Romano," he said, watching me closely. "I owe you a debt. In my world, debts are not taken lightly." His world. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. I glanced at the men flanking the door, their faces impassive. I didn't do it for a reward, I managed. You needed help. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You risked your life for a stranger. That is rare. And dangerous. His tone softened, just a fraction. But I am not a man who forgets kindness. I insist on repaying you. A chill ran through me, equal parts fear and fascination. Alessandro studied
I don't want anything,
his gaze sharp and
I said.
assessing. But even as I
You are
spoke,
brave,
I
Miss
knew it
Russo.
wasn't that simple.
But bravery can
I was
be a
already
liability in
entangled,
my world.
drawn into
There
a
are people
world
who
I
would
barely
use your
understood.
kindness against you.
He paused, letting the words sink in. Last night was not an accident. Someone tried to kill me. You were caught in the crossfire. The room seemed to shrink, the air thickening with unspoken threats. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. What happens now? He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now I ensure your safety. You will stay here under my protection until I am certain the danger has passed. It wasn't a request. I glanced at the door, realizing escape was not an option. My ordinary life, my job, my apartment, my carefully constructed routines, felt impossibly distant, replaced by marble floors and velvet shadows. Alessandro stood, offering his hand. Trust me, Miss Russo. In my world, trust is everything. I hesitated, then took his hand, the contact sending a jolt through me. His grip was firm, his eyes unreadable. I had stepped into a world of danger and opulence, and there was no turning back. As he led me deeper into the estate, I couldn't help but wonder what price my heroism would demand, and what secrets Alessandro Romano was still hiding. I followed Alessandro through the winding halls of his estate, my footsteps muffled by thick carpets, my mind racing with questions. The grandeur of the place pressed in on me. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings, the faint echo of voices behind closed doors. I felt like an intruder in a world that wasn't mine, a world where every gesture carried hidden meaning and every shadow might conceal a threat. He led me to a sunlit sitting room overlooking manicured gardens. The view was beautiful, but I couldn't relax. I perched on the edge of a velvet sofa, hands clenched in my lap, as Alessandro poured 2 cups of coffee from a silver carafe. He handed me one, his expression unreadable. I know this is overwhelming, he said, his voice gentler than before. But you must understand, last night was not a random tragedy. Someone wanted me dead. You saved my life, and now you are a witness. That makes you a target. I shook my head, trying to process it all. I'm just a nurse. I don't know anything about your world. I don't want to be involved. He sat across from me, his gaze unwavering. You already are. The men who set that fire, they don't care about your innocence. They see you as a loose end. A chill crept up my spine. I thought of the masked man I'd pulled from the flames, the way he'd vanished into the night. I'd imagined him as a victim, not a kingpin. Now, the reality was settling in. I was in over my head, and the only thing standing between me and danger was the man sitting across from me. I can't just disappear from my life, I protested. I have a job, friends. People will notice if I'm gone. Alessandro's lips curved in a faint, almost sad smile. Your safety comes first. My men will make sure your absence is explained. You'll have everything you need here. I promise, this is temporary, until I find out who betrayed me. The word hung in the air. Betrayed. I glanced at the guards stationed outside the door, their faces impassive. Was it possible that someone in this fortress of loyalty had turned against him? The thought made my skin prickle. He must have seen the doubt in my eyes. You don't trust me, he said quietly. I met his gaze, searching for any sign of deception. I don't know you, he nodded, accepting the truth. Trust is earned. But for now you must trust that I have no reason to harm you. You saved my life. That means something to me. I sipped the coffee, trying to steady my nerves. The rich, bitter taste grounded me, but my mind kept circling back to the fire, the chaos, the way Alessandro's men had found me so quickly. How did you know where I lived? I asked. He didn't flinch. I have resources. I needed to be sure you were safe. The answer was both reassuring and unsettling. I was used to being invisible, just another face in the city. Now I was under a microscope, every move watched, every word weighed. A knock at the door interrupted us. One of Alessandro's men entered, murmuring something in rapid Italian. Alessandro's expression darkened, and he dismissed the man with a curt nod. When he turned back to me, his eyes were stormy. "There was an attempt on one of my associates last night," he said. "Someone is sending a message." I swallowed hard. "Do you think it's someone close to you?" He hesitated, then nodded. "In my world, betrayal often comes from within. That's why I can't let you leave, not until I know who I can trust." The weight of his words settled over me. I realized with a jolt that I wasn't just a guest. I was a liability, a piece in a game I didn't understand. But I also saw something else in Alessandro's eyes, a flicker of vulnerability, a man surrounded by enemies, unsure who to trust. I stood, restless. What am I supposed to do here? Just wait? He rose as well, closing the distance between us. "You are not a prisoner, Miss Russo. You are under my protection. My staff will see to your needs. If you wish, you may walk the grounds, use the library, anything you like, but you must not leave the estate." His tone was final, but not unkind. I nodded, feeling the walls close in. "And if I refuse?" He looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "Then you put yourself, and me, at risk." I cannot allow that. I turned away, staring out the window at the gardens. The sun was shining, birds flitting among the roses, but I felt trapped, a butterfly pinned beneath glass. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare, but deep down I knew he was right. The danger was real, and I was already in too deep to walk away. As Alessandro left the room, I caught a glimpse of the guards exchanging a look, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. "Betrayal," he'd said. I wondered who in this palace of secrets could be trusted. And I wondered, too, what it would cost me to survive in Alessandro Romano's world. I pressed my hand to the cool glass, watching the world outside, and realized I was no longer just a nurse or a hero. I was an asset, protected, watched, and very much alone. But I was determined not to be a pawn. If I was going to survive, I'd have to learn the rules of this dangerous new game. And I'd have to start by figuring out who, besides Alessandro, wanted me gone. Days blurred together in the gilded cage of Alessandro's estate. I wandered the halls, trying to make sense of my new reality, but the opulence only made me feel more out of place. I missed the steady rhythm of the hospital, the comfort of routine, the simple satisfaction of helping people without fear or suspicion. Here, every smile from the staff felt rehearsed. Every glance from the guards a silent warning. I was safe, but I was not free. Alessandro kept his word. My needs were met, my safety ensured. But I could feel the tension simmering beneath the surface. He was always busy, always surrounded by men who spoke in low voices and watched me with wary eyes. Yet every evening he found time to join me for dinner, a ritual that became the anchor of my days. At first our conversations were stilted, polite but distant. He asked about my work, my family, my favorite books. I answered cautiously, unsure how much to reveal. But as the days passed, the walls between us began to crack. One night, as rain lashed the windows, I found him in the library, staring at a chessboard, lost in thought. "Do you play?" he asked, gesturing to the board. I shook my head. "Not really. My grandfather tried to teach me, but I was always more interested in checkers." He smiled, a real one this time, and motioned for me to sit. Chess is a game of patience and strategy. Every piece has its role, its value. Sometimes, you have to sacrifice one to save another. I studied the board, the pieces arranged mid-game. "Is that how you see people? As pieces to be moved and sacrificed?" His expression darkened, and for a moment, I thought he would shut me out. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "In my world, trust is a luxury. Loyalty is everything. I do what I must to protect those who matter." I saw the weight he carried, the burden of leadership and the loneliness that came with it. "And who protects you?" I asked softly. He looked at me, something raw flickering in his eyes. "No one. Not really." The vulnerability in his voice surprised me. For the first time, I saw the man beneath the armor, the boy who had learned too early that the world was dangerous, that love could be a weapon. I wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but I hesitated, unsure if he would accept it. The next day, I witnessed a different side of him. A dispute had broken out among his men, voices raised, accusations flying. Alessandro entered the room, his presence commanding instant silence. He listened, eyes cold and calculating, then made a decision with ruthless efficiency. The man who had betrayed his trust was escorted out, his fate sealed with a single nod. There was no hesitation, no mercy. I watched from the shadows, unsettled by the ease with which he wielded power. Yet, later that night, I saw him kneel beside an elderly gardener, speaking softly in Italian, his hand gentle on the man's shoulder. The contrast was jarring, ruthless leader and compassionate son all in the same breath. That evening, as we sat by the fire, I found the courage to ask, "How do you live with it? The things you have to do?" He stared into the flames, his jaw tight. "You learn to separate your heart from your actions. If you don't survive." "But you're not heartless," I said quietly. "I've seen how you care for your people, for your family." He glanced at me, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "You see more than most," I shrugged, feeling exposed. "It's part of my job. Nurses have to look past the surface, see what people are really feeling." He leaned closer, his voice low. "And what do you see when you look at me?" My heart skipped. I met his gaze, searching for the right words. "I see a man who's lost too much, who's afraid to let anyone in. But I also see someone who wants to be more than what the world expects." The silence between us was charged, the air thick with unspoken words. Alessandro reached for my hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You're not like anyone I've ever met, Elena." I felt a flush rise to my cheeks. "You're not what I expected either," he smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Most people see only the monster. You see the man." For a moment, the world outside faded. The danger, the secrets, the walls that kept us apart. All that remained was the warmth of his hand in mine, the steady beat of his heart beneath the surface. But reality intruded, as it always did. A knock at the door, a whispered message, and Alessandro was gone, swept back into the storm of his world. I was left alone by the fire, my thoughts tangled with longing and fear. I knew I was falling for him, against all reason. I knew, too, that loving a man like Alessandro Romano could only end in heartbreak. But I couldn't help the way my heart raced when he looked at me, the way my soul ached for the man behind the mask. As the night deepened, I stared into the flames, wondering if I could survive in his world without losing myself. I wondered, too, if Alessandro could ever let down his guard enough to let me in, or if the walls he'd built would keep us both prisoners forever. And as the shadows danced across the room, I realized that the greatest danger I faced wasn't from his enemies, but from the feelings growing between us. Impossible to ignore and even harder to escape. The days that followed were tense, the air in the estate thick with suspicion. Alessandro's men moved with a new wariness, their conversations clipped, their eyes darting to every shadow. I felt it too, a prickle at the back of my neck, a sense that something was wrong beneath the surface calm. Alessandro grew more distant, his meetings longer, his temper shorter. The warmth that had begun to bloom between us was overshadowed by a gathering storm. One afternoon, I wandered the gardens, seeking a moment of peace. The roses were in full bloom, their scent sweet and heavy, but even here, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. I paused by the fountain, letting the cool spray mist my face when I heard voices. Low, urgent, just beyond the hedge. Curiosity drew me closer. I recognized the voices, Marco, Alessandro's right hand, and another man I'd seen at dinner, Luca. They spoke in rapid Italian, but I caught enough to understand. Tonight, when he leaves for the meeting, she'll be alone. It's the only chance. My blood ran cold. They were talking about me. I pressed myself against the hedge, heart pounding. "Are you sure she knows nothing?" Luca asked, his voice tight. Marco's reply was a hiss. "She's a liability. Alessandro is blinded by her. We can't risk it. Once she's gone, he'll see reason." A branch snapped beneath my foot, and the voices fell silent. I held my breath, praying they hadn't heard. After a moment, Footsteps retreated, and I slumped against the hedge, shaking. The truth crashed over me. Someone close to Alessandro was plotting against him, and I was the target. I stumbled back to the house, mind racing. Should I run, hide? I couldn't leave without warning Alessandro, but if Marco and Luca suspected I knew, they wouldn't hesitate to act. I found Alessandro in his study, hunched over a stack of papers, his face drawn with exhaustion. He looked up as I entered, concern flickering in his eyes. "Elena, what's wrong?" I closed the door behind me, my hands trembling. "We need to talk, now." He stood crossing the room in 2 strides. "Tell me," I took a shaky breath, forcing the words out. "Marco and Luca, they're planning something. They said you'd be gone tonight, that I'd be alone. They called me a liability." For a moment, Alessandro was silent, his face unreadable. Then a muscle in his jaw twitched and his eyes hardened. "Are you sure?" I nodded, fear tightening my chest. "I heard them in the garden. They said you're blinded by me, that once I'm gone, you'll see reason." He turned away, fists clenched at his sides. "Marco has been with me since we were boys. I trusted him with my life." His voice was raw, wounded. "And Luca? I should have seen it." I stepped closer, my own fear eclipsed by the pain in his eyes. "What will you do?" He looked at me, something fierce and protective in his gaze. "I'll handle it. But you must stay in this room. No one comes in, no one goes out, unless it's me. Do you understand?" I nodded, but dread coiled in my stomach. "Alessandro, be careful. They're dangerous." He cupped my face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the storm raging inside him. "So am I," he whispered. And for the first time, I saw the full force of the man he truly was. Ruthless, determined, and willing to do anything to protect what mattered. He left, the door locking behind him. I paced the room, nerves frayed, every sound magnified by fear. Minutes stretched into hours. I pressed my ear to the door, straining for any sign of what was happening. Raised voices echoed down the hall, then a crash, a shout, the unmistakable sound of a struggle. I flinched as footsteps thundered past, then silence. My heart hammered, every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to do something. But I was trapped, powerless, forced to wait as the world outside spun out of control. Finally, the door swung open. Alessandro stood there, blood on his shirt, his eyes wild. Behind him, Marco was held by 2 guards, his face twisted with rage and betrayal. "It's over," Alessandro said, his voice hoarse. Marco confessed. "Luca is dead." I stared at Marco, disbelief warring with horror. "Why?" I whispered. Marco spat at the floor, his voice venomous. "You made him weak. He forgot who he was. I did what had to be done." Alessandro's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "Take him away," he ordered. And the guards dragged Marco from the room, his curses echoing down the hall. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Alessandro slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I crossed the room, kneeling beside him, unsure what to say. He looked up, eyes haunted. I trusted him. He was my brother in all but blood. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. "You did what you had to do." He shook his head, pain etched deep in his features. "This is my world, Elena. Betrayal, violence, loss. I wanted to keep you safe from it, but I can't. Not anymore." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I'm not leaving you, Alessandro. Not now." He pulled me into his arms, holding me as if I were the only thing keeping him afloat. For the first time, I felt the full weight of the danger surrounding us. The fragility of the trust we'd built. The safety I'd felt in his arms was gone, replaced by the cold certainty that nothing would ever be the same. As night fell over the estate, I knew we were no longer just fighting for survival. We were fighting for each other. And in a world where trust could be shattered in an instant, that was the most dangerous risk of all. The world outside the car window blurred into green and gold as Alessandro drove us away from the estate, away from betrayal and bloodshed. The city faded behind us, replaced by winding country roads and the hush of ancient olive groves. I watched him in profile, his jaw set, hand steady on the wheel, but I could see the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes. Neither of us spoke until the villa came into view. A sun-washed stone house nestled among cypress trees, its windows glowing with the promise of safety. Inside, the air was cool and still, scented with lavender and old wood. For the first time in days, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease, if only a little. Alessandro led me to a terrace overlooking rolling hills, the sky painted with the colors of dusk. We sat in silence, the only sound the distant song of cicadas. He broke the quiet first, his voice low. This place belonged to my mother. She brought me here when I was a boy before everything changed. He stared out at the horizon, lost in memory. I used to think I could leave it all behind, that I could be someone else. I listened, sensing how rare it was for him to share this much. What happened? He hesitated, then met my gaze. My father was killed when I was 16. I had to become a man overnight. I made promises I didn't understand, took on burdens I wasn't ready for. Every choice I've made since then has been about survival, mine, and the people I care about. I reached for his hand, surprised when he didn't pull away. You don't have to carry it all alone. He squeezed my fingers, his grip warm and strong. I don't know how to let go, not when letting go means losing everything. The vulnerability in his voice tugged at something deep inside me. I wanted to tell him he wasn't alone, that I saw the man behind the mask, but my own fears crowded in. I'm scared too, Alessandro. I never wanted this life. I wanted to help people, to make a difference, but now I'm not sure who I am anymore. He turned to me, his eyes searching. You're stronger than you think. You saved me, Elena. Not just from the fire, but from myself. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. I felt the distance shrink, the walls we'd built crumbling in the quiet of the villa. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my face, his touch lingering. My breath caught, heart pounding as he leaned closer, his lips just a whisper from mine. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between us, the warmth of his hand, the longing in his eyes, the promise of something more. I closed my eyes, ready to surrender to the moment, when a distant sound shattered the spell, a car door slamming, voices echoing from the driveway. We broke apart, the tension between us electric and unresolved. Alessandro stood, every muscle taut, scanning the horizon for threats. The peace of the villa was fragile, a thin veil over the danger that still hunted us. He turned back to me, his voice rough with emotion. We're not safe yet, but I promise I won't let anything happen to you. I nodded, my heart aching with everything left unsaid. The villa was a sanctuary, but only for now. Outside, the world was still waiting, full of enemies and uncertainty. But in that fleeting moment, I saw a future I'd never dared to imagine. A future where love was possible, even in the shadow of fear. As night fell and the first stars appeared, I knew that whatever happened next, I wouldn't run from it. I would face it with Alessandro, for as long as fate allowed. And as we retreated inside, the memory of his almost kiss lingered on my lips, a promise of what might still be if we could survive the storm that was coming. The villa's peace was short-lived. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Alessandro on the phone, his voice low and urgent, words clipped in rapid Italian. I caught fragments: security, breach, time running out. My heart pounded as I dressed. The memory of last night's almost kiss still warm on my lips, now replaced by a cold nod of dread. Alessandro met me in the kitchen, his face grim. They found us. Marco's allies. We have to be ready. I tried to steady my hands as I poured coffee, but the cup rattled against the saucer. How much time do we have? He shook his head. Not enough. I've called for help, but we're on our own until they arrive. The villa, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Alessandro moved through the rooms, checking locks, loading a pistol with practiced hands. I followed him, fear and adrenaline warring inside me. What can I do? I asked, desperate to be useful, to do more than just wait. He paused, looking at me with a mixture of pride and worry. Stay hidden. If anything happens, there's a car in the garage. Take the back road and don't look back. I bristled at the thought of running, of leaving him to face danger alone. I'm not leaving you, Alessandro. He reached for me, his touch fierce. Elena, please. If anything happened to you, I cut him off, voice trembling but resolute. I made my choice the night I pulled you from that fire. I'm not running now. A shadow passed over his face, but he nodded, accepting my decision. Together, we barricaded the doors, drew the curtains, and waited. The hours crawled by, every creak and whisper of wind setting my nerves on edge. I tried to distract myself, remembering the patients I'd calmed in the ER, the way I'd held their hands and promised they weren't alone. Now I clung to Alessandro's presence, drawing strength from his determination. As dusk fell, headlights swept across the drive. Alessandro tensed, gun in hand, eyes locked on the door. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The first shot shattered the silence, glass exploding as bullets tore through the windows. I ducked behind the kitchen island, heart hammering, as Alessandro returned fire, his movements precise and controlled. The villa echoed with chaos, shouts, gunfire, the crash of furniture. I crawled to the pantry, searching for anything to help, and found a first aid kit, my hands shaking as I clutched it to my chest. A scream tore through the air, Alessandro's name, shouted in rage. I peeked through the crack in the door and saw Marco's ally, a hulking man with a scarred face stalking through the living room. Alessandro met him head-on, their fight brutal and desperate. Blood spattered the floor, the sound of fists and fury filling the space. I saw Alessandro falter, a knife glinting in the attacker's hand. Without thinking, I rushed forward, slamming a heavy vase into the man's head. He staggered, giving Alessandro the opening he needed to disarm and subdue him. The man collapsed, unconscious, and Alessandro turned to me, breathless and bleeding. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, but his eyes shone with gratitude and something deeper. "I couldn't let you die," I replied, voice thick with emotion. The danger wasn't over. More footsteps thundered outside, voices shouting orders. Alessandro pulled me close, pressing his forehead to mine. "If we don't make it..." I silenced him with a kiss, pouring all my fear and hope into that moment. "We will," I whispered. "We have to." The next wave hit harder, gunfire, smoke, the acrid sting of fear. Alessandro fought with everything he had, but I could see him tiring, blood seeping from a wound on his arm. I tore open the first aid kit, working quickly to staunch the bleeding, my hand steady despite the chaos. "Go," he urged, voice strained. "Take the car. Save yourself." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "Not without you. I won't leave you behind." He looked at me, something breaking in his gaze. "You're too good for this world, Elena." I smiled through my tears. "Maybe, but I'm exactly where I want to be." The attackers breached the final door, and Alessandro pulled me behind him, shielding me with his body. I clung to him, refusing to let go. The world narrowed to the two of us, our breaths, our heartbeats, the promise we'd made to face whatever came together. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. Alessandro's reinforcements, finally arriving. The attackers scattered, some fleeing, others captured by Alessandro's men. The villa was left in ruins, but we were alive. I collapsed against Alessandro, relief and exhaustion washing over me. He held me tight, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved me again." I looked up at him, my heart full. We saved each other. The threat had passed, but the cost was written in blood and broken glass. I knew the danger wasn't truly over. There would always be enemies, always another fight. But I also knew I'd made my choice. I'd chosen to stay, to fight, to love a man who would risk everything for me. As the night deepened and the villa quieted, Alessandro and I sat together amid the wreckage, our hands entwined. The world outside was still dangerous, still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt a fierce sense of belonging. I had faced the storm and survived, not as a victim, but as a partner, an equal, and a woman who refused to run from love or danger. And as dawn crept over the hills, painting the sky with hope, I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with Alessandro by my side. The time for hiding was over. Now it was time to fight for the future we both wanted, no matter the cost. The villa was a battlefield. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp tang of gunpowder, every window shattered, every door splintered. The once peaceful sanctuary was now a war zone, echoing with the staccato of gunfire and the shouts of men locked in a deadly struggle. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding, as Alessandro fired from behind an overturned table, his jaw set, eyes blazing with determination and pain. Outside, headlights swept across the drive as more of Alessandro's men arrived. But so did more of Marco's allies, their numbers swelling in the darkness. The night was alive with chaos, screams, curses, the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground. I could barely breathe, the world reduced to flashes of violence and the desperate need to survive. Alessandro barked orders in Italian, his voice cutting through the noise. "Hold the line. Don't let them inside." His men responded with grim resolve, but I could see the fear in their eyes. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and the villa was falling apart around us. A bullet ricocheted off the wall inches from my head. I ducked, crawling across the floor to where Alessandro crouched, blood seeping from a wound in his side. "You're hurt," I said, my voice trembling. He shook his head, teeth gritted. "It's nothing. Stay down, Elena, please." But I couldn't just hide. I scanned the room, searching for anything that could help. My gaze landed on the security panel by the door, a relic from the villa's more peaceful days. An idea sparked. "Alessandro, the panic room. Can we get to it?" He nodded, understanding instantly. "It's in the study, but we'll have to fight our way there." I swallowed my fear, adrenaline surging. "Let's go." We moved together, covering each other as we darted through the ruined halls. I grabbed a fallen lamp, hurling it at an attacker who lunged at Alessandro, buying us precious seconds. Alessandro fired, dropping another man, but his movements were slowing, blood loss taking its toll. We reached the study, barricading the door with a heavy desk. Alessandro slumped against the wall, breathing hard. I tore open the first aid kit, hands steady as I pressed gauze to his wound. "You have to stay awake," I urged, voice fierce. "Don't you dare leave me now." He managed a weak smile. "Bossy, aren't you?" I choked out a laugh, tears stinging my eyes. "Someone has to keep you alive." The door shuddered as attackers pounded against it. Alessandro handed me his pistol, his hand shaking. "If they get through," I cut him off, voice trembling but resolute. "They won't." The pounding grew louder, wood splintering. I glanced at the security panel, praying it still worked. My fingers flew over the buttons, entering the code Alessandro whispered. The wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage. "Go," I said, helping him to his feet. We stumbled into the passage, the door sliding shut behind us just as the attackers burst into the study. In the darkness, Alessandro sagged against me, his strength fading. I guided him to the panic room, a small space lined with monitors and supplies. I worked quickly, cleaning and bandaging his wound, my hands moving on autopilot. Alessandro watched me, his eyes dark with pain and something deeper. "You saved me again," he whispered. I shook my head, fighting tears. "We saved each other. I'm not leaving you, Alessandro. Not now, not ever." He reached for my hand, his grip weak but insistent. "Elena, listen to me. If I don't make it..." I pressed my fingers to his lips, silencing him. "Don't say that. You're going to be fine." He caught my hand, holding it to his heart. "I need you to know. I love you. I tried to fight it. Tried to keep you safe by keeping you at a distance. But I can't. You're the only light in this darkness. If I die tonight, I want you to remember that." Tears spilled down my cheeks, but I smiled through them. "You're not going to die. I won't let you." A crash echoed through the villa. The attackers had found the passage. I grabbed the pistol, positioning myself between Alessandro and the door. The monitors flickered, showing men searching the halls, their faces twisted with rage. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The door rattled, then burst open. Marco's ally stormed in, gun raised. I fired, the shot ringing in my ears, and he fell. The threat finally ended. More footsteps thundered outside, but Alessandro's men arrived, driving the attackers back. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but at last, silence fell. I collapsed beside Alessandro, exhaustion and relief crashing over me. He pulled me into his arms, holding me as if I were the only thing anchoring him to this world. "You're incredible," he whispered, voice raw with emotion. I've never met anyone like you. I buried my face in his shoulder, letting the tears fall. I was so scared. I thought I'd lose you. He cupped my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. You're the bravest person I know. You saved my life, Elena. You saved my soul. We sat together in the wreckage, the chaos of battle fading into the intimacy of our connection. The world outside was still dangerous, still uncertain. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. We had survived, together. Alessandro's men secured the villa, rounding up the last of the attackers. Paramedics arrived, tending to the wounded. I stayed by Alessandro's side, refusing to let go of his hand. He drifted in and out of consciousness, but every time his eyes opened, they found mine, filled with love and gratitude. As dawn broke, painting the sky with pale gold, I realized how much had changed. I was no longer the woman who had walked past a burning building, content with a quiet life. I was a fighter, a survivor, and I had found love in the most unlikely place. Alessandro squeezed my hand, his voice barely a whisper. Stay with me, Elena. Whatever happens, don't let go. I leaned in, pressing my forehead to his. Never. I promise. The chaos of the night faded, replaced by the steady beat of our hearts, the certainty of our bond. We had faced death and betrayal, loss and fear, but we had found each other in the ruins. And as the sun rose over the battered villa, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger, braver, and more in love than ever before. The villa was eerily quiet in the aftermath, the chaos of the night replaced by a heavy, uncertain calm. Sunlight filtered through broken windows, illuminating the scars of battle. Shattered glass, bloodstains, bullet holes in the walls. Alessandro's men moved quietly, tending to the wounded, cleaning up the wreckage, their faces drawn and weary. I sat at Alessandro's bedside, exhaustion pressing down on me, my hand wrapped tightly in his. He was stable now, the worst of his wounds cleaned and stitched, but the lines of pain and fatigue etched deep into his features. He drifted in and out of sleep, murmuring my name, his grip tightening every time I tried to move away. I stayed, watching over him, my heart torn between relief and fear. When he finally woke, his eyes found mine, dark and searching. You're still here, he whispered, voice rough. I'm not going anywhere, I replied, though even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. The night's violence had changed everything. I had seen the darkness of Alessandro's world up close. The danger, the brutality, the constant threat. I had fought for him, bled for him, but now I wondered if I could live with the cost. He must have seen the conflict in my eyes, because he reached for my hand, his touch gentle. Elena, I know what you're thinking. I know what I'm asking of you isn't fair. My world is dangerous. It's ugly. I can't promise you safety, only that I'll do everything in my power to protect you. I looked away, struggling to find the words. I'm not afraid of danger, Alessandro. I'm afraid of losing myself. I don't want to become someone I don't recognize, someone who accepts violence and fear as normal. He sat up, wincing, but his gaze was steady. You're not like them. You never will be. You're the light in this darkness, Elena. You remind me of who I want to be, not who I am. Tears pricked my eyes. But what if that's not enough? What if loving you means losing everything I've ever known? He cupped my face, his thumb brushing away a tear. Then we'll build something new, together. I don't want you to change for me. I want you to be exactly who you are. That's who I fell in love with. The words hung between us, heavy with hope and fear. I wanted to believe him, to trust that love could be enough to bridge the gap between our worlds. But the memories of the night, of blood and gunfire, of the way Alessandro had fought and killed to protect me, haunted me. I stood, pacing the ruined room, my mind racing. I need time, I said finally, my voice trembling. I need to figure out who I am now and what I want. I can't make this decision for you or for anyone else. It has to be for me. He nodded, pain flickering in his eyes, but he didn't try to stop me. Take all the time you need. I'll wait for you, Elena, however long it takes. I walked through the villa, the weight of my choice pressing down on me. I saw Alessandro's men watching me, their respect and gratitude clear, but also their wariness. I was an outsider, a complication, a reminder of everything that had changed. I wandered the gardens, the scent of roses heavy in the air, and tried to remember the woman I had been before all this, the nurse who had risked her life for a stranger, the woman who had believed in happy endings. I thought of Alessandro, of the way he had looked at me in the firelight, the way he had held me as if I were the only thing that mattered. I thought of the fear in his eyes when he realized he might lose me, the vulnerability he had shown when he confessed his love. I knew I loved him, fiercely and completely, but I also knew that love alone might not be enough. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I returned to Alessandro's side. He looked up, hope and uncertainty warring in his gaze. I don't have all the answers, I said softly. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I can't walk away from you. Not yet. I need to see if we can build something real, something that's ours. He reached for me, pulling me into his arms, his embrace fierce and desperate. We'll figure it out, together. I rested my head on his shoulder, letting myself believe just for a moment that a new beginning was possible. The world outside was still dangerous, still uncertain, but in Alessandro's arms, I felt a fragile hope take root. As night fell, I lay awake beside him, listening to the quiet, my heart full of questions and longing. I didn't know if I could ever truly belong in his world, or if he could ever leave it behind. But I knew I wasn't ready to give up. Not on him, not on us. The future was a blank page, waiting to be written. And as I drifted into sleep, I promised myself that whatever happened next, I would face it with open eyes and an open heart, ready to fight for the love I had found in the unlikeliest of places. I left the villa at dawn, the world hushed and silvered with mist. Alessandro stood at the door, his wound still fresh, his eyes shadowed with longing and regret. We didn't say goodbye. There were no promises, no declarations, just a silent understanding that this wasn't the end, only a pause. I needed space to breathe, to remember who I was before the fire, before the danger, before him. The drive back to the city felt surreal. The roads I'd once traveled without a second thought now seemed unfamiliar, every turn heavy with memory. I watched the sun rise over the skyline, painting the world in gold, and wondered if I would ever see it the same way again. My old apartment was just as I'd left it, small, cluttered, safe. But I was different. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, haunted by the echo of Alessandro's voice, the warmth of his touch, the promise in his eyes. Days passed in a blur. I returned to work at the hospital, grateful for the distraction, for the chance to lose myself in the steady rhythm of caring for others. But even in the chaos of the ER, I felt his absence like a missing heartbeat. I caught myself glancing at the door, half expecting him to appear, to pull me back into his world. I told myself I needed time, that I was doing the right thing. But every night, as I lay awake in the quiet, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. Then, one evening, as I walked home beneath the city lights, my phone buzzed with a message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. My heart stuttered as I read the words, "Wherever you go, I will find you." A shiver ran through me, not of fear but of something deeper, a connection that distance couldn't break. I smiled, tears prickling my eyes, and typed a reply, "I'm not hiding. I'm waiting." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever truly belong in Alessandro's world, or if he could ever leave it behind. But I knew that love had changed me, had made me braver, stronger, more willing to fight for what mattered. I had lost my innocence, my sense of safety, but I had gained something far more precious: trust, hope, and the knowledge that I was capable of surviving anything. But even as I clung to that hope, I felt the world shifting around me. In the shadows of the city, another pair of eyes watched, cold and calculating. A figure lingered in the darkness, phone in hand, a cruel smile playing on their lips. They had seen the headlines, heard the rumors of the attack at the villa, and now they knew Alessandro Romano had a weakness, a woman who had risked everything for him. The message was sent, the trap set. I was no longer just a nurse, no longer just a bystander. I was a target, a piece in a game I barely understood. And somewhere, out there, a new enemy was waiting, ready to strike. As I stood at my window, watching the city lights flicker against the night, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was afraid, yes, but I was also ready to fight, to love, to face whatever came next. I had survived the fire, the betrayal, the violence. I had found love in the unlikeliest of places, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. So I waited, heart open, eyes wide, knowing that this was only the beginning. The story wasn't over, not for me, not for Alessandro, not for the world we had built together out of ashes and hope. If you want to know what happens next, if you want to see whether love can survive the darkness, whether Alessandro and I can find our way back to each other, whether we can defeat the new enemy lurking in the shadows, let me know in the comments. Your voice matters. Your hope keeps this story alive. Because in the end, every love story is a leap of faith, and ours is just getting started.